Chapter 17. After confining Howard Keeley in his cell with a sandwich and chips, Nick drove to Jacob Larson's house and pulled in behind a white pickup truck parked in the driveway. Pushing the car door shut, Nick gave a smile and nod to the children playing in the yard. Upon reaching the front door, he secured the gun in his holster and knocked. Not hearing anything, he knocked again. The door opened. There stood Mrs. Beth Larson. Judging by the lines of fatigue in her face and the sullen look in her eyes, Nick figured the woman had seen her share of problems. The last thing he wanted was to add to them.
Good afternoon, Sheriff.
Good afternoon, Miss Larson. Is Jacob here?
What has he done this time?
She sighed, pushing the screen door open, letting Nick inside.
I'm here to take him into custody for the possession of an illegal substance.
Drugs?
Her face tensed with panic.
Yes, Miss Larson. Is he here?
What if the drugs aren't his? What if he's not guilty?
Do you know anything about this matter?
No, I'm just saying, what if the drugs belong to someone else?
It wouldn't matter whether he was a user or dealer. He's broken the law. I have a warrant for his arrest.
I see,
she said quietly.
Miss Larson, I know you want to protect your son, but the best thing you can do is tell me where I can find him.
When Jake came home from school, he put some things in his duffel bag and left. I haven't seen him since. Sometimes he leaves, and he doesn't come back for hours. But today was different. He said something about the fire chief was there at the school looking for a bomb and that something came up missing from his locker. It didn't make a lot of sense. I'm sorry that I can't be of more help.
Do you think he's left town?
He's got nowhere to go. His father's out in L.A. Those two haven't spoken in years. He's got an uncle in Cedar Bluff, but I don't think Jake would go there.
I'll have my deputy be on the lookout for him. But if you hear anything, please give me a call. I'd like to take care of this matter without anybody getting hurt.
Thank you, Sheriff,
she said, barely loud enough for Nick to hear, but he did. A few minutes before 7, Nick pulled into the designated spot for a town hall meeting. Most of the talk and complaints were from parents concerned about the bomb scare at the high school. Nick assured them that it was a false alarm and that the fire department acted in the students' best interests. Nick could feel Martin Haley's I told you so smirk throughout the evening, as well as during the speech Nick gave at the podium concerning the very subject. But it wasn't as if Nick hadn't seen that look before. Then there was the announcement regarding the annual book drive at the Millbrook Library and the Founders Day picnic, which was sure to be a hit with the help of the Haysdale drill team's performance. After other subjects were discussed and voted on, Nick returned to the podium. He looked out at the citizens, staring back at him. They were all counting on him more now than ever before. Nick reached down and took a sip from his glass of water, and then began.
I just wanted to say how much I appreciate the courage and perseverance that you've shown during these past couple of months. Sure, we've all seen better times, where we've trusted a little more, laughed a little more, we've been paid for our goods and services without a second thought. But I want to tell you that those days aren't gone forever. We're just in a period of transition. But transition doesn't have to be feared when you know you're not going through it alone. Callahan is my home. Just like many of you, I grew up here. I got married here. I'm raising my family here. Like you, I've made some pretty great memories. And if you're wondering what's going to happen to all that you've grown to love about our town, let me just say that when this is over, we will be standing taller and stronger than we've ever stood before. Thank you for coming out tonight. Have a good evening.
Nick said as Martin Haley led a round of applause, followed by the clapping and cheering from others who rose to their feet in a standing ovation. Nick returned a modest smile and a nod before stepping down. As the meeting ended, the sound of muffled voices grew with the rustling of people moving toward the exit.
Nick!
Martin yelled. He turned around.
Martin, what you said, the people needed to hear it.
Martin said as a few others passed by and patted Nick on the shoulder.
That woman from the government, I haven't seen her around lately. I kind of got the impression that the two of you were, you know.
He grinned knowingly.
Agent Stone returned to D.C.
Nick said, using the most official tone he could muster.
Really?
Martin sounded surprised. Looking around, he noticed that a few other people were waiting to speak with Nick.
I'm sorry to hear that. I'll be in touch. Have a good evening. Thanks, Martin. Same here.
Nick said as Martin rushed off.
Sheriff Moran,
Ida Gus said, standing beside Trini.
Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. Gus.
Nick said, shaking both of their hands.
Trini and I really appreciate the inspirational words you said tonight, and we were wondering if you and your kids would care to join us for some corned beef and cabbage and apple pie.
Ida asked. Nick wasn't really a fan of corned beef or cabbage, but not having eaten since breakfast, he felt his stomach tighten with hunger.
Once things slow down a bit at the station, my kids and I would love to. Thank you.
Nick sounded most grateful.
Then it's settled.
Ida beamed warmly, clasping Nick's hand. Nick stayed a while longer to talk with Hal Dietrich, the Leahys, and his father. George Moran never missed a town hall meeting. Nick just figured that he wanted to avoid getting the second-hand scoop of his performance as sheriff from the other locals at the barber shop he frequented. That evening, after tucking Allie into bed and saying goodnight to Chase, Nick went into the living room where he stretched out comfortably on the sofa. He always loved the peace he found this time of night. Yet tonight, when he closed his eyes, the only thing he could see were the faces of his citizens staring back at him. Could they see the same thing he saw? No end for this case in sight? Were they all trying to be patient because they felt sorry for him, being a divorced dad with a wife who left him? Whatever the case, Nick was sure he couldn't rely on their patience much longer. Time was running out. He was tired, and Michelin was gone, making him feel fatigued on days when ordinarily he felt nothing at all. Saturday morning, Nick dropped Allie off at his parents' home before driving up to Stanley to see Lainey. Like all male visitors, he waited in the lobby of the dormitory until she came down.
Nick!
Lainey screamed, practically throwing herself into his arms. He laughed, giving her a big hug.
I was surprised when Ma told me that you were driving up,
Lainey said, encouraging him to join her in the lobby where they could talk. But since it was a nice day, Nick suggested that they take a walk instead. As they took the path that led to the park, Nick went over in his mind where he'd begin. It didn't seem right to jump right into his suspicions regarding her fiancé without any real proof. Lately, his advice and interference had managed to leave him feeling quite alone. He didn't want to burn bridges with Lainey, too.
What's on your mind, Nick?
Lainey asked, reaching the bench situated beneath the large oak, which offered comfortable shade down by the pond.
Nothing much. Can a guy pay his sister a visit?
He asked, taking his place beside her.
Am I to believe that you left your case just to visit me?
My case?
Yes. Ma tells me all the time how hard you're working.
Have you heard from David?
Nick asked, subtly changing the subject.
Isn't he somewhere tanning himself on the shores of St. Simon's?
Yeah, I forgot.
He chuckled.
How are the plans for your wedding coming?
Nick asked, thinking that was a good place to start.
I haven't had the chance to talk to Vincent. He's like you, always busy with his work. I suggested that we take some time to get away, but he says there'll be plenty of time for that after we're married. The truth is, I'm starting to think he's having second thoughts.
Has he told you that?
No. It's just lately, he seems so preoccupied and angry. I tried to talk to him about it, but he just pulls away. I feel like I did something wrong.
I'm sure it's not you.
You think it's someone else?
The question quickly came to mind.
No, I'm sure it's nothing. Listen, I was thinking of taking Dad's advice.
Advice about what?
He's been suggesting that I ask Vincent for help with the case. I was just wondering if he thought he would mind.
Something's obviously bothering him. Now probably isn't a good time.
Maybe he'll open up and talk to me about it.
Nick said, laying the foundation for his plan.
You think he will?
Lainey asked. Her eyes were so trusting.
It's possible. I'd be happy to give him a call this evening.
Thank you, Nick. I knew I could count on you,
she said, giving him a hug.
Don't mention it,
he said, pushing aside his guilt. Returning home, Nick sat at his desk, staring down at Vincent's phone number that Lainey scribbled down on a pad of paper for him. He wasn't sure how to start the conversation. Somehow, "I think you're scum" didn't seem like the right approach. Nick got up and went to the refrigerator for something to drink. At a time like this, he would have preferred a beer, but always being on duty made him settle for a glass of something less intoxicating. Grabbing up the handset, he drew in a calming breath and dialed the number. As Nick listened to the phone ring on the other end, he silently prepared himself for what he would say.
Hello?
A man answered on the third ring. It was Vincent.
Hey, Vincent, it's Nick. How are you? I'm good.
Vincent said with a faint laugh.
although I'm a little surprised to hear from you. I didn't realize you had my number. Lainey gave it to me. Hope that was okay. No, it's fine. What's going on? I've got a couple of tickets to see the San Antonio Chargers play tomorrow. Not sure if you're into basketball or not. Are you kidding? They've got a chance to make it to the playoffs. This will be the year. Absolutely. Anyway, Lainey mentioned how hard you've been working. I thought maybe you could use a break. Count me in. The game starts at 7. I'll just meet you there. Sounds good.
Vincent said. Nick was about to respond when he heard a knock at the door.
I've got to go. Somebody's at the door. Thanks for inviting me, Nick. Don't mention it. We're practically family. I'll see you tomorrow.
Nick said, hanging up. With Chase out for the evening, Nick knew it wasn't someone for him, and there wasn't any chance that it was Michelin, seeing how he hadn't heard from her since she left over a week ago. Nick went to the door and looked out. He smiled, opening the door. There she stood, quite the opposite of the way she looked when she left. Did her red checkered button-down shirt, faded blue jeans, and ponytail reveal the outcome of her meeting in D.C.? For her sake, Nick hoped not.
Come in. When did you get back?
Nick asked, holding the door for her. Earlier this afternoon. Michelin said, stepping inside. I've been sitting at the motel trying to work up the nerve to face you again.
I didn't know you wanted to.
I really don't know what I want anymore. I thought I knew. But apparently I was wrong. I was wrong about everything, including Brett.
Have a seat. Can I get you anything?
No, I'm fine. I'm just really embarrassed. Michelin said with a little laugh, taking a seat on the sofa.
Why are you embarrassed?
Nick sat down beside her. I've been suspended, pending a review.
For what?
It was worse than he had feared. Brett told his boss that I neglected to follow through on a vital lead with the case. That not only did I compromise my professional ethics, but that I prolonged this case in order to pursue romantic interest between you and me. Then, to make matters worse, he brought up the relationship he and I had, only he failed to mention that it was consensual. He said that I pursued him. William was furious. Without giving me the chance to explain, he demanded my badge. He said that my behavior was a disgrace to the department. My career's over.
Where's Brett now?
He's in D.C., I guess. I don't know. How can I have been so stupid? The thing that bothers me the most is that William knows Brett, and yet he sided with him anyway. I have been with the department for over 5 years, and just like that, it's over. William's mind was already made up before I got there. Nothing I said mattered.
It matters to the people who know you, the people who care about you.
Yeah, well, those people are too afraid of it happening to them.
Not everybody's afraid of doing what's right. You knew what you were facing going back, and yet you still went. That's got to stand for something. So, what happens now?
Brett's returning next week to handle things himself. William has given him full authority over everything. That includes my equipment and my files.
By the time Brett comes back, this case could very well be closed.
But I'm not on the case anymore, Nick. I can't help you. Michelin told him. Nick's attempt to take Michelin into his arms was thwarted as the front door opened. Seeing Chase come in, Michelin quickly pulled away.
Hi, Dad. Welcome back, Miss Stone.
Chase grinned. Good evening, Chase. Your dad and I were just... Michelin struggled to explain. Chase paused at the corner of the sofa, giving her his undivided attention.
All right, Chase, that's enough.
Nick cut in, fully aware of what his son was doing.
It's nice to see you again, Miss Stone.
He turned to his dad.
I'm going to turn in. Good night.
Chase snickered as he went to his room. I'm so sorry, Michelin said, hearing Chase's door shut.
Will you spend the night with me?
I would love to, but it wouldn't be a good idea, not with Chase here.
I'm just not ready for you to leave me again.
Is that porch swing of yours pretty comfortable?
What did you have in mind?
It's a nice night. I thought maybe you and I could go sit on the swing, talk, maybe watch the sun come up.
Yeah, we could do that.
Nick smiled. Nick led Michelin out to the porch where they made themselves comfortable on the swing. This is absolutely perfect. The gentle creaking of the swing mingled with the distant chirping of the crickets.
Who would have thought?
He asked, entwining his fingers within hers. What, that you could be such a gentleman?
Then you're buying all of this, are you?
You're pretty convincing.
Tell me something about you, something you've never told me before.
How's this? When I turned 18, I attended Penn University in Wendover, Maryland, where I studied political science and intelligence.
So you always knew that you wanted to work with the government?
It was either that or join the army.
My dad is military, just like his dad and my 2 brothers. I wanted to follow in his footsteps, but my mother wanted me to have a family, a house with a white picket fence, and a dog.
What, no kids?
That went without saying.
My brother's an officer in the Army. He's stationed down at Fort Brannox in Texas.
My family and I were stationed at Fort Brannox until we were transferred to Fort McKelvey in Kansas, and then Fort Myer in South Carolina. The list goes on. What about you? Did you ever serve?
I thought about it, but I just figured I could do more good serving Callahan.
Callahan is lucky to have you, Michelin said as Nick smiled with an appreciative nod.
Not to ask a stupid question, but do you still want to work for Brett?
I did a lot of exciting work with Sid. I was making a real difference. Granted, I hadn't been with the division for very long. This was my first independent assignment.
I didn't know that.
I didn't want to announce that part. The thing is, I started off in the general inspector's office. I gathered intel, but I wanted to do more field work. So 4 years ago, I joined Sid. I was in training for the first 2 years. The last 2 years, I worked with a partner. Brett surprised me by offering this case to me. He said I was ready to fly solo.
Brett gave this case to you?
He said I was one of the best agents on the team.
He's right. But did he ever suggest that you run a background check on Charlene?
No. He just gave me her file. I saw it. It was clean. There was nothing, no misdemeanors, and definitely nothing about counterfeiting.
Did he change it?
I know you don't trust Brett. Quite frankly, neither do I. But that case didn't come from him. It came from a call on the tip line. The department passed the case to our division, and Brett assigned the case to me. A day later, we received a report about the fire in Hildusky, and Brett told me he wanted me on the next flight out. That's when I came here.
And you're saying there's no way he could have altered that file before he gave it to you?
Why would he do that?
I don't know. The woman's record obviously wasn't clean. She is definitely affiliated with counterfeiting. Somebody's lying somewhere.
But how could Brett benefit from changing her file? He would have to have a personal interest in this case, and there's no proof of that.
I guess. But here's a thought. Maybe you could consider staying here.
My life is in D.C. What's left of it, anyway. Although now, since I'm out of work, I can barely afford my apartment.
I said stay here.
Nick repeated himself. Here, Michelin said, finally understanding what he meant.
I know it's not what you're used to. If there's a spare room at the end of the hall, it's yours if you want it.
I can't stay here with you and your children. What would they think? What would Callahan think?
The whole town?
Nick chuckled. Don't you have to maintain some sort of moral code with your citizens? Besides, that would be just the ammunition the review board would need to bury me.
Then accept the position as my partner. We'll wrap up this case together and all the other cases that follow.
Partner? Don't you mean deputy?
No, I want you beside me.
Nick, I would love to work beside you.
But?
There's no buts.
Good. I'm glad we got this settled.
Me too. So, what do we have to do on the case tomorrow?
Nothing. Tomorrow's Sunday. I'm taking the morning off.
Then he laughed. What's so funny?
I just remembered that I invited my future brother-in-law to a basketball game.
You have tickets?
Yeah. Mike, the coach from Chase's school, was selling them last week. He had some last-minute cancellations and they were going to go to waste. I didn't really think I had a use for them. But as it turns out, it's a perfect opportunity for me to get to know the man my little sister is planning to marry.
I'm proud of you for taking some time away from work to do something fun.
There's speculation that connects this man directly to the case, according to Howard Keeley anyway.
Are you kidding?
I wish I was. Howard told me there's a guy named Vincent, supposedly working with another dirty cop in New York by the name Rico Orjela, who's involved in drug trafficking and counterfeiting bills.
And you weren't going to tell me?
I'm not keeping anything from you.
It sounds dangerous.
How dangerous could it be? We're going to a basketball game. That's it. I'll talk to the guy, pick him for information, see what he knows.
You think he's just going to come right out and tell you everything?
No. But if he doesn't show up, at least I've got his number. Maybe you can have his phone tapped.
I don't have access to the department anymore. But maybe I can call in a favor with Jerry. It's worth a shot.
I'd appreciate it.
Just don't get hurt.
I'll keep that in mind.
Nick said as they continued to talk. The distant sound of a train whistle awoke Michelin the following morning. She opened her eyes. The rising sun left the sky orange, yellow, and pink, just underneath a patch of thin, wispy clouds in the east. Nick slept soundly, holding Michelin in place beside himself, guarding her against the crisp chill of the morning air. He shifted in his sleep in an attempt to loose the crick in his neck,
But finding no relief, he opened his eyes. Seeing Michelin's warm smile reminded him of why he had slept out on the porch in the first place.
Good morning.
Good morning. So, you really stayed out here all night, huh?
He asked, trying to ignore the sharp pain shooting up his back and ending in his neck.
Yes, we did. It's a beautiful morning,
Michelin said, getting up and walking over to the edge of the porch, where she stood looking out.
Beautiful pretty much describes it,
Nick said, stepping up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. He closed his eyes, taking in the scent of her hair and the warmth of her body.
So, today's the day.
Sweetie, please don't worry about me. I'll be fine,
Nick said, hearing the sadness in her voice.
What time you get home?
She caressed the muscle in his forearms that held her next to him.
If you'd take me up on my offer to stay here, you'd know.
Very funny. Just call me the minute you get done. I'm going to head out.
I was hoping you'd stay for breakfast.
Sounds nice, but I'm going to go catch up on a few more hours of sleep.
I wish I could join you.
I don't think I would be able to sleep if you did.
You're probably right.
Nick stood as he waited until she went into the house and returned with her purse.
Dream about me,
he whispered against her ear.
Always do.
She smiled as she told him goodbye. The sight of Michelin getting into her car and driving away brought a rush of sadness over Nick. Sure, he had planned to see her later, but there were too many other things he had to deal with between now and then.